I remember the sound first, the dry snap of branches under my bare feet, the rustle of leaves wet with the pre-dawn mist, and then the distant echo of shouts. Hunters. The scent of metal and gunpowder burned the air, and there was something in the wind that told me I wouldn't make it out of that forest hole. I ran until my breath tore at my chest, until I tasted iron in my mouth, and when my legs gave out, I thought it was the end. But it was there, amidst the mud and silence, that he appeared. Before we dive into this story, leave your comment with a rating from 1 to 10 and tell us which city you're joining us from. May this moment bring reflection and emotion to your heart. He didn't need to roar for fear to subside. His mere presence was enough. The air grew heavy, and even the branches seemed to bend around him. The king of the Northwood Pack, the alpha who ruled with an iron fist and eyes no one dared meet for long. They said he saved no one, that pity had died with the last woman who dared defy him. And yet there he was, before me, breathing deeply, assessing the fragile, dirty creature that fate had dropped at his feet. I don't know what he saw in me, perhaps just a life about to expire, perhaps a mirror of his own isolation. He said nothing. He simply covered me with his dark cloak, and in that instant the cold seemed to retreat. I should have thanked him, but his gaze stopped any words. It was a look that weighed like a sentence. When I arrived at the fortress, all eyes pierced me like blades. The clan females whispered, the Omegas averted their gazes, the soldiers murmured with suppressed laughter. I was the intruder, the wildling brought from the mud by a king who had never permitted closeness. No one understood, not even I. With each step inside those damp stone corridors, I felt the ground reject me. The tapestries fluttered with the wind, and the echo of voices was a constant reminder that I didn't belong there. He, however, seemed indifferent to the voices. His presence filled the halls like the sound of distant thunder. He didn't need to speak to be obeyed. When our gazes met, there was something ancient and indecipherable, as if he was trying to decipher why fate had made him reach out to me. And I, with my shame and my debt, could only lower my eyes. His counselor, Elara, a woman with a severe face and sharp eyes, watched me as if weighing a threat. "The king has his reasons," she would say, but her tone was a warning, not comfort. Others whispered that I was an omen, that an omega found under the moonlight would bring imbalance, that the king would lose his mind. Perhaps they were right, because, as the days passed, I noticed that the silence between us began to change form. He trained me in the inner garden, the one where the wind never ceased and the statues seemed to watch. His gaze followed my every move, and when I missed a step, there was a flicker in his eyes that wasn't anger, but something deeper, more dangerous. I felt the weight of being alive because of him, and that weight transformed into warmth. Rivals began to act. One night, they left a tray outside my door, raw meat mixed with poisonous herbs. Another, they spread rumors that I had bewitched the king. When I was summoned to the great hall, the air was thick with anticipation. Torches cast tall shadows and all eyes turned to me. He was on the throne, unmoving, his fingers resting on the arm of the carved wood. "They say I should judge you," he said, and his voice cut through the hall like a blade. "They say you are a threat, that my judgment is compromised." The murmurs grew like a wave about to break. I trembled, but I lifted my chin. If that is what they believe, let them cast me out. I did not ask to be saved. For an instant, the silence became unbearable. His gaze met mine, and something inside me broke, not from fear, but from recognition. He rose, walked to me, and when he spoke again, his voice was grave, almost hoarse. "I did not ask to feel what I feel when I see you, but I will not allow them to touch you." The hall erupted in reactions, shock, murmurs, revolt. Elara recoiled a step, and I realized that unintentionally the king had broken an ancient pact before everyone. He was choosing me, not as a subject, not as a debt, but as something no one dared to name. Since that night, nothing was the same. The guards looked at me with fearful reverence, the Omegas with disguised resentment, and he. He watched me as one who feared his own need. In the chamber assigned to me, I sat by the window every night, watching the moon grow in the sky, counting the days until it became full. There was an ancient legend about the blood moon. They said that when it appeared, secrets would come to light, and masks would fall. I counted the days, not out of fear, but with a strange certainty that something would change when red stained the night sky. On the third day after the incident in the hall, a servant knocked on my door at dawn. It was Miranda, the only one who looked me directly in the eye, without fear or contempt. In her arms, she carried a dress unlike any I had ever seen, dark blue fabric that seemed to capture all the shades of night, embroidered with silver threads that resembled constellations. "For the festival," she explained, placing the dress on my bed. "The harvest festival begins today. The king has ordered that you be present." My heart quickened. The harvest festival was the biggest celebration in the Northwood. 3 days of music, dances, and banquets where all castes gathered, from noble alphas to omega servants. It was also the time when alliances were forged, contracts sealed, and, occasionally, mates chosen. "Why does he want me there?" I asked, touching the fabric with hesitant fingers. It was soft as water, more luxurious than anything I had ever touched. Miranda averted her gaze. "They say emissaries from the Southridge arrived last night. Princess Serena is among them." The name dropped like a stone into the calm lake of my mind, creating waves of apprehension. Serena, the alpha princess of the Southridge pack, known for her beauty and political cunning. There had been rumors for years about a possible marital alliance between Northwood and Southridge, a union that would strengthen both territories against the threats of the Eastern Wilds. A union that, until a few weeks ago, seemed inevitable. "He expects you to be ready by nightfall," Miranda continued, carefully adjusting the dress. "He sent word that he will come for you personally." When she left, I stared at the dress for a long time. It was a statement, or perhaps a provocation. To dress an omega without lineage in the colours of royalty, to display her at a festival where the most suitable candidate for the throne would be. The king was openly defying traditions, and I would be both the instrument and the target of the controversy. The day dragged as if time had been stretched beyond its natural limits. When the sun began to descend behind the mountains, painting the sky blood red, Miranda returned to help me with the dress and my hair, which was elaborately braided and adorned with small silver jewels that shimmered in the candlelight. "They'll hate me even more," I murmured, observing my reflection in the silver mirror. The girl staring back at me looked like a stranger, taller, more dignified, less frightened. "They already hate you," Miranda replied with surprising frankness. "But they also fear you, and that is much more valuable in the Northwood court." Before I could ask what she meant, firm knocks sounded at the door. When Miranda opened it, the king was there, filling the doorway with his presence. He wore black and silver, mirroring my own colours, and his eyes, normally cold as winter, burned with an intensity that made me hold my breath. "Leave us," he commanded, and Miranda withdrew with a quick curtsy. We stood in silence for a moment, he observing me as if seeing something beyond my appearance. Finally, he took a step forward, closing the door behind him. "You're apprehensive," he said, not as a question, but as a statement. "I am an omega born in the mud of the border village," I replied, holding his gaze with more courage than I felt. "And you are going to display me before the entire court, including an alpha princess everyone expects to be your queen." A rare smile touched his lips, so brief I might have imagined it. "Do you truly believe I care what everyone expects?" "No," I admitted, "but I care about your safety. Defying traditions has its price." He stepped closer and the air between us seemed charged with electricity. "The price has already been calculated. The question you should ask is, why am I willing to pay it?" My heart beat so hard I was sure he could hear it. "Why?" He raised his hand, his fingers hovering millimeters from my face, not touching, but I could feel the warmth emanating from his skin. "Because in all these years as king, all the battles, all the negotiations, all the power games, I have never found someone who made me feel as alive as I do when I look into your eyes." The words hung between us, laden with meaning, with danger, with possibility. Then, as if returning from a trance, he stepped back and offered his arm. "Come. The moon is already rising and the court awaits." The great hall was transformed. Hundreds of torches and candles created a sea of golden light, reflecting on rich tapestries and polished metals. Long tables laden with food lined the perimeter, and in the center a space had been left for dances and performances. The scent of roasted meat, fresh bread, sweet wine, and burning herbs created an intoxicating atmosphere. Musicians played in a corner, their ancient melodies echoing off the stone walls. When we entered, a gradual silence spread through the crowd, like ripples after a splash. Eyes turned, conversations died, expressions of surprise, indignation, and curiosity blossomed throughout the hall. The king advanced as if noticing nothing, guiding me firmly by the arm, walking directly towards the center of the hall. It was then that I saw her, Serena of the Southridge, tall and magnificent in her red and gold gown, the colors of her pack. Her black hair fell like silk to her waist, adorned with gold jewels. Her almond-shaped, shrewd eyes observed our approach without revealing emotion, but the tension in her posture spoke volumes. Beside her stood a middle-aged man, robust and with a severe expression, whom I recognized as Lord Tormand, the chief emissary of the Southridge. Both made formal bows when the king stopped before them, and I mimicked the gesture, aware of the inadequacy of my movements compared to the princess's natural grace. "Your Majesty," Lord Tormand greeted, his deep voice echoing. "It is an honor to be received at your court for the Harvest Festival." "The honor is mine, Lord Tormand," the king replied. "And Princess Serena? I hope your journey was pleasant." The princess's eyes briefly moved to me, a flash of assessment passing through them before returning to the king. "Quite pleasant, Your Majesty, though I am eager to rest after so many days on the road." "Certainly," the king gestured to a nearby servant. "Show the princess and her entourage to their chambers. Rest and refresh yourselves. The main banquet will begin in an hour." As Serena and her group withdrew, I felt that every pair of eyes in the hall was fixed on me, the stranger beside the king, wearing the colors of nobility. Among the crowd, I spotted Ilara, her face a mask of carefully controlled disapproval. "Breathe," the king murmured to me. "The first wave is always the strongest. After that comes resigned acceptance." "Or open rebellion," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. His eyes gleamed with something close to amusement. "You learn the games of court quickly." He leaned slightly, his lips close to my ear. "Remember, you owe no explanations to anyone here, not even to me." Before I could answer, the king was approached by a group of lords, and I took the opportunity to retreat. I found refuge near a pillar, observing the flow of people, the subtle power plays manifested in glances, gestures, and positions in the hall. I had learned to read people during my life in the village streets. It was a survival skill to know who represented danger, who offered help, who could be deceived. "Impressive, isn't it?" The soft voice beside me startled me. An older woman had approached without me noticing, grey hair pulled back in a simple bun, modest but quality clothes, clear, intelligent eyes. "The festival," she explained, noting my hesitation. "It always amazes me how we manage to create so much beauty, even living in the shadow of the mountains, with winter always lurking." I relaxed a little, realizing she didn't seem hostile. "It's the first time I've seen anything like it," she smiled, the wrinkles around her eyes deepening. "And you are dressed for the occasion, I must say. Night blue and silver, the colors of the ancient lineage." Something in the way she said that made me look at her more closely. "Who are you?" "Someone who has known many kings and queens." She took a sip from her goblet. "My name is Helena. I was the wet nurse to the current king, and before him, I served his father." I felt a strange connection to this woman who seemed so at ease in her own place in the world. "Why are you talking to me? Everyone else prefers to keep their distance, as if I carry some contagious disease." Helena chuckled softly. "Ah, child, it is fear that keeps them away, not contempt. Fear of what you represent." "And what would that be?" Her eyes fixed on mine with surprising intensity. "Change. And nothing terrifies the nobility more than the prospect that the world they know might be transformed." Before I could ask more, the sound of trumpets announced the formal start of the banquet. Helena moved away with a final meaningful look, leaving me with more questions than answers. The banquet was a surreal experience. I was seated at the head table to the king's right, while Princess Serena sat to his left, an arrangement that generated new murmurs throughout the hall. The food was richer and more varied than anything I had ever tasted, but I barely managed to eat, aware of the glances, the whispers, the growing tension that seemed to emanate from every corner. Serena was polite, but her smile never reached her eyes when she addressed me. Her seemingly innocent questions were small traps about my family, which I didn't have, my education, non-existent in noble terms, my knowledge of etiquette, learned hastily in recent weeks. "It's fascinating how His Majesty welcomes people from all backgrounds," she commented at one point, her melodious voice carrying a hint of venom. "Such generosity is rare among rulers." "It is not generosity," the king replied, his voice calm but firm. "It is recognition of value where it exists, regardless of the circumstances of birth." A tense silence settled, broken only when the musicians began to play a more lively melody, signaling the start of the dances. The king rose and everyone in the hall followed suit. "Princess Serena," he said politely, "would you grant me the honor of the first dance?" It was tradition, and refusing would be a diplomatic insult. Serena smiled, inclining her head in acceptance. As they moved to the center of the hall, I felt momentarily abandoned, exposed to the gazes now free to assess me without the protection of the king's presence. "Don't worry," a familiar voice said. It was Helena who had approached again. He had no choice. Politics. "I know," I replied, watching them move gracefully across the hall, the formal dance maintaining appropriate distance between their bodies. "She's perfect for him, isn't she? Born and raised to be queen." Helena made a sound of disapproval with her tongue. "Perfection is an illusion, child. True union comes not from ideal complements, but from connections that defy explanation." As the dance continued, I noticed Ilara in intense conversation with Lord Tormund, both casting glances in my direction. The sense of danger, which had never been completely absent since my arrival at the castle, intensified. The music ended, and after the formal bow, the king began to move away from Serena. However, before he could return to the table, a new noble requested a dance with the princess, and another invited another lady of the court, and soon the center of the hall was filled with couples spinning to the rhythm of the music. The king, however, walked directly across the hall towards me, ignoring several noblewomen who clearly expected to be invited. When he stopped before me and extended his hand, the entire hall seemed to hold its breath. "You don't have to do this," I murmured, aware of the spectacle we would be creating. His eyes fixed on mine, determined. "I am not doing anything I do not wish to do." With my heart beating against my ribs like a caged bird, I placed my hand in his. His skin was warm, calloused from years of wielding a sword, and the contact sent a shiver up my arm. He led me to the center of the hall where the other couples made space, creating a circle around us. "I don't know how to dance," I confessed, feeling panic grow as everyone watched us. "Trust me," he replied, positioning my hand on his shoulder while his other held mine firmly. "Just feel the music and follow my movements." The orchestra began a new melody, slower and deeper than the previous one. The king guided me surely, his strong, precise movements compensating for my inexperience. At first I was stiff, too aware of the stares, the fear of stumbling, of embarrassing him. But gradually the music began to flow through me, and my body responded instinctively to his. "See?" he murmured, an almost imperceptible smile touching his lips. "Your body knows what to do, even if your mind doubts." We danced in silence for a few moments, the world around us seeming to fade as we moved in sync. Then he spoke again, his voice low enough for only me to hear. "There is something I need to show you tonight, something that might explain all of this." "What?" His eyes grew serious. "The truth about who you are, and why your arrival changed everything." The music ended before I could question him, and he stepped away with a formal bow, though his eyes conveyed a silent promise. As we separated, I noticed Serena watching us with a calculating expression, whispering something to Lord Tormund beside her. The rest of the banquet passed in a blur of tense conversations, meaningful glances and growing anxiety about what the king intended to reveal to me. When finally the guests began to disperse and the festival moved to the outer gardens, where bonfires had been lit for the celebration to continue into the night, he appeared by my side again. "Come," he said simply, offering his arm. We followed less frequented corridors, descending spiral staircases that seemed to plunge into the castle's depths. The air grew colder and damper, and the torches on the walls cast dancing shadows that seemed to have a life of their own. Finally, we reached an ancient door, reinforced with metal darkened by time. The king withdrew a key from his belt, not of metal, but of what appeared to be carved bone, and inserted it into the lock. The door opened with a prolonged groan, revealing a circular chamber beyond. "What is this place?" I asked, hesitating at the entrance. "The blood chamber," he replied, his voice echoing slightly. "Where the true history of the Northwood Pack is recorded." Entered cautiously. The room was illuminated by a strange bluish light that seemed to emanate from crystals embedded in the walls. In the center was a circular stone table, upon which rested an enormous book, bound in dark leather. The walls were covered with ancient symbols, some familiar, others completely strange, and niches carved into the stone housed various objects: a crystal dagger, a simple black iron crown, a silver goblet, among others. The king closed the door behind us and walked to the book. "This is the Lineage Codex. It contains the history of every ruler of the Northwood, recorded with their own blood." "Why do you bring me here?" My voice came out as a whisper, the solemnity of the place demanding reverence. He looked at me for a long time before answering. "Because I believe your name belongs in these pages." My heart skipped a beat. "What? That's impossible. I'm an Omega with no name, no family." "That's what you've always believed," he interrupted, opening the book to a specific page. "Because that's what they wanted you to believe." I approached hesitantly. On the page, there was an elaborate family tree traced in dark red ink. Blood, I understood with a shiver. Names and dates went back centuries, branching and converging again through generations. At the top of the most recent page, his name shone, still with the vividness of not quite dry ink. "Here," he said, pointing to a side branch that stemmed from his own family line. "My uncle Edric had a daughter. The child and mother were declared dead during the Bloodwinter when I was too young to question the official story." I looked where he pointed. The child's name had been carefully erased, leaving only a dark smudge. "But recently," he continued, "I discovered this." He turned a few pages, reaching a section of text written in tight script. "My father's journal. He confesses that the child did not die. She was sent away to the border village to grow up anonymously, protected from the danger that threatened her." My head spun. "Are you suggesting that When I found you in the forest," he said, his eyes fixed on mine, "I recognized something familiar in your face. The same eyes as my uncle, the same shape of the chin, but I thought it was a coincidence until—" He hesitated, then pulled a small object from his pocket. It was a silver locket, engraved with the same symbol that adorned his own official necklace. "This was sewn into the hem of your clothes. I found it when the servants washed them on the first day." I took the locket with trembling fingers. It was heavy, ancient, and awakened in me a strange sense of recognition, like a long-forgotten dream. "That proves nothing," I whispered, though something inside me was already accepting the possibility. The pieces of my fragmented life beginning to form a new pattern. "There is a way to be sure," he said, taking the crystal dagger from one of the niches. "The Codex recognizes the blood of the true lineage. If you are truly Edric's daughter, granddaughter of the former king—" He left the sentence incomplete, extending the dagger with its hilt towards me. I looked at the translucent blade, reflecting the bluish light of the room. What if I'm not? What if this is just an extraordinary coincidence? "Then nothing changes," he replied simply. "You will continue to have my protection and my—" He paused, as if the next words were difficult to pronounce. "My respect." But we both knew everything would change. If I wasn't who he thought, the justification for my privileged position would disappear. The political pressure for an alliance with the Southridge through marriage to Serena would become unsustainable, and my presence would be more a burden than an asset. With a deep sigh, I took the dagger. The hilt was cold against my palm, and the blade reflected my distorted face when I raised it. With a quick movement, I cut the tip of my index finger, watching the drop of scarlet blood that formed. The king turned to a blank page in the Codex. "Press your finger here," he instructed, pointing to the center of the page. I obeyed, pressing the wound against the yellowed paper. For a moment, nothing happened beyond the red stain spreading slightly. Then, before our eyes, the blood began to move, thin lines extending from the central drop, forming complex patterns, letters, ancient symbols. A name emerged, written in my own blood. Aurora. Aurora, the king repeated, his voice little more than a whisper. Daughter of Edric and Lyra, direct cousin of the current king, secondary heir to the Northwood throne. His eyes met mine, shining with an emotion I couldn't name. You are not a nameless Omega. You are an alpha of royal blood, hidden even from yourself. The world seemed to tremble beneath my feet, decades of identity crumbling in an instant. Why, was all I could ask. Why would they hide me? Why would they make me believe I was... Politics, he replied bitterly. My father had 2 brothers. Edric was the youngest, considered weak for marrying a woman from outside the pack, a sorceress from the forest folk. When a daughter was born from this marriage, you, my other uncle Darius, saw a threat. He convinced my father that the half-blood child would bring ruin to the pure Northwood lineage. So they sent me away. And when your parents protested, they were permanently silenced. A hunting accident, they said. His jaw tightened. I was just a boy. I knew nothing until I found this journal, hidden among my father's belongings after his death. I looked again at the name on the page, my true name, Aurora. It sounded foreign, yet also right in some deep, inexplicable way. And now, I asked, raising my eyes to him, what does this mean for everything? He closed the book carefully, as if fearing its contents might evaporate. It means you have a legitimate right to protection and position at court. It means the alliance with the Southridge through my marriage to Serena is no longer the only option to strengthen the kingdom. He hesitated, then added more softly. And it means what I feel for you is no longer a political impediment, but potentially a solution. Before I could fully process his words, a noise at the door made us both turn. Helena stood at the entrance, her normally serene face marked by lines of concern. "Forgive the intrusion, Your Majesty," she said, making a quick curtsy. "But there is something you need to know immediately. Lord Tormund and Princess Serena are convening the council for an extraordinary session. They are publicly questioning the king's judgment and suggesting a temporary regency until..." She hesitated, looking at me. "Until the malign influence is removed from court," the king swore softly. "Ilara is behind this. I always suspected her loyalty to Darius, even after his death." "We need to act quickly," Helena said, entering the room and closing the door. It was then that I noticed the small bundle she carried, wrapped in dark cloth. "I brought this. I believed it might be necessary tonight." She unwrapped the object, revealing a carved wooden box. Inside, on red velvet, rested a delicate tiara, ancient silver worked into intertwined branches with small blue stones embedded that resembled dewdrops. "Lyra's crown," Helena explained. "Your mother. I kept it all these years, waiting for the right moment." The king looked from the tiara to me, then to Helena. "You knew all this time?" "It was I who took her to the village that night," Helena confessed, her ancient eyes shining with contained emotion. "At Lyra's request before they murdered her. I swore to protect the secret until it was safe to reveal it," she turned to me, "or until destiny brought you home, as your mother predicted it would." With gentle hands, Helena placed the tiara on my head. The weight was strange but not uncomfortable, as if it was something my body remembered how to get used to, even if my mind had no such memory. "If we are to face the council," the king said, his voice regaining the authority that characterized him before the court, "we must do so with the full truth revealed. No more secrets, no more half-truths." "It will be dangerous," Helena warned. "Ilara has powerful allies, and Serena will not easily give up the promise of the Northwood throne." "No true power was built without risk," he replied, then turned to me. "The choice, however, is yours. Aurora." He pronounced my true name as if testing its taste, and the sound sent a shiver down my spine. "We can keep the secret, seek another solution. Give you time to get used to the truth." I looked from the tiara on my head to the book where my blood had traced my destiny, and then to the man before me, a king who had risked his position and reputation for an unknown Omega, who we now discovered was much more. A wave of clarity swept away all doubts, leaving only crystalline certainty. "No," I replied, lifting my chin. "No more hiding. No more lies. It's time to reclaim what was taken from me." A rare, genuine smile illuminated the king's face. He extended his hand, and when I took it, our fingers intertwined with the familiarity of souls recognizing each other. "Then we will face the council," he said. "Together." The walk to the council chamber was the longest and shortest of my life, long with anticipation, too short to prepare for what was to come. Helena had gone ahead, to ensure all members were present and, more importantly, to summon the witnesses who would validate my identity. As we walked, the king explained the protocol, the council rules, who would likely be an ally and who an enemy. But his voice seemed distant, overlaid by the beats of my own heart and the weight of the tiara on my head. Not just metal and stones, but generations of history, responsibility, and power. "Remember," he said, stopping before the double doors of the chamber, "no matter what they say or do inside, you have as much right to be here as any of them. More, in fact." His eyes swept over my face as if memorizing every detail. "Are you ready?" "No," I replied honestly, "but we'll go anyway." A brief smile touched his lips, and then he nodded to the guards, who opened the heavy doors. The council chamber was an octagonal room, dominated by a round, dark oak table. 12 chairs surrounded it, each carved with the symbol of one of the great Northwood houses. The king occupied the largest of them, facing the door, decorated with the emblem of the crown, a wolf crowned by stars. All seats were occupied. I recognized Lord Tormund and Princess Serena, though they had no formal right to a seat on the Northwood Council. Elara was there, of course, her face a mask of false concern. Helena had taken her place in a smaller chair, slightly away from the table, the position of the guardian of memories. I understood. And there were others, lords and ladies whose names I barely knew, but whose gazes revealed the full spectrum of emotions, from open hostility to cautious curiosity. When we entered, conversations ceased abruptly. All eyes fixed first on the king, then on me, and finally on the tiara I wore. I heard muffled exclamations, saw eyes widen, brows furrow. "What does this mean?" Elara's voice cut the silence sharp as a knife. "This person wears the crown of the royal house." "Not just any crown," the king replied calmly, leading me to the center of the room. "Lady Lyra's tiara, wife of my uncle Edric, this woman's mother." Murmurs erupted around the table. Lord Tormund rose partially from his chair, his face red with indignation. "Your Majesty, this farce goes beyond all limits. First, you bring a nameless Omega to court. Then you display her at the festival before noble visitors. And now you suggest some kind of royal kinship." "I suggest nothing," the king replied, his voice sharp as steel. "I state a fact proven by the lineage codex. This woman, whom we have known until now only as the Omega rescued from the forest, is in fact Aurora, daughter of Edric and Lyra, direct cousin to the throne and legitimate heir to the Northwood house." Chaos ensued. Voices rose in protests, questions, demands. Serena remained strangely silent, her calculating eyes never leaving my face, as if searching for proof of fraud or truth. "Silence!" The king's voice brought immediate order. He rarely raised his tone, and when he did, the effect was overwhelming. When he had everyone's attention again, he continued. The codex confirmed her identity through blood proof. Helena, who took her to the village 2 decades ago under Lady Lyra's orders, confirms her identity. And for those who still doubt, he gestured towards the door. 2 guards entered, escorting an elderly woman I had never seen before. She walked with difficulty, leaning on a dark wooden staff, and her wrinkled face bore an expression of unwavering dignity. "Lady Morgana," the king announced, ancient court midwife, who brought Aurora into the world and marked her right shoulder with the symbol of the royal house, as was tradition for all newborns of the main lineage. The old woman approached me, her eyes clouded by age but still piercing. "Allow me, child," she said, her voice surprisingly firm for someone of such advanced age. Hesitantly, I lowered the shoulder of my dress enough to reveal the mark I had always believed to be a birthmark, a small design vaguely resembling a star above a mountain. Lady Morgana examined the mark, then nodded solemnly. "This is the seal I made with my own hands on the night she was born, under the full moon of the winter solstice. This is without a doubt Aurora, daughter of Edric and Lyra, blood of the Northwood royal house." A stunned silence fell over the chamber. Even Alara seemed momentarily speechless, her plan crumbling before irrefutable evidence. It was Serena who broke the silence, her voice surprisingly controlled. "If what you say is true, Your Majesty, then the political situation changes considerably." "Indeed," the king agreed. "Aurora's return to court strengthens the royal house internally, while also opening new possibilities for external alliances." Lord Tormund stood up, his face a mask of contained indignation. "Your Majesty, our journey to the Northwood was based on the understanding that a marital alliance would be formed. Princess Serena has prepared for years to become Queen of the Northwood. This unexpected development seems a deliberate maneuver to avoid previously indicated commitments." "No formal commitment was established," the king replied firmly. "Only preliminary discussions. And now, with Aurora's presence at court, new diplomatic options present themselves." He paused significantly, "including the possibility of a direct union between the Northwood and Southridge houses that would not require my own marriage to Princess Serena." Everyone's eyes turned to me, and I suddenly understood what the king was suggesting: an alliance through my own marriage, possibly with some noble from the Southridge house. "This is absurd," Elara exclaimed, finally regaining her voice. "This woman grew up as a common Omega in the streets of a miserable village. She has no education, no training for court, no knowledge of traditions or politics. How can you suggest she represent the royal house in any capacity, much less in a marital alliance?" The king stared at her coldly. "Strange that you worry so much about her well-being now, Elara, when it was your own influence over my father that led to Aurora's exile in the first place." He turned to the rest of the council. "Lady Elara served as my father's counsellor when the decision to send Aurora away was made. And it was she who convinced me for years that an alliance with the Southridge was our only option for strengthening." Elara paled. "I only advised what I believed was best for the kingdom. Or best for your own ambitions?" Helena questioned softly from her seat. "I always wondered why you insisted so much that the child be declared dead instead of simply removed from court. Now I understand. You feared this day would come." Lord Tormund, realizing that the political situation was rapidly changing before his eyes, adopted a new approach. "If Lady Aurora is truly who they say," he said, emphasizing the "if," "then surely she needs time to adapt to her true position. To learn the customs, the etiquette, the politics. It would not be appropriate to rush decisions about alliances or marriages." "On that we agree," the king replied, surprising everyone. "Aurora deserves time to fully understand her place and her rights, and the council deserves time to accept the new reality of the royal house." Serena, who had remained in calculating silence until then, finally spoke. "Perhaps there is a possible compromise." All eyes turned to her. "If Lady Aurora is truly of the royal house, then a period of transition would be beneficial for all parties. The Southridge delegation could remain as guests for a few weeks to observe her progress and discuss alliance options that benefit both kingdoms." It was a clever proposal. It allowed her to remain at court, observing, looking for weaknesses, perhaps even seeking ways to discredit my identity, while keeping alive the possibility of still becoming queen. A sensible proposal, the king agreed, though his tone indicated he perfectly understood her motivations. Northwood hospitality will be extended to the Southridge delegation for as long as they wish to remain. Elara opened her mouth to protest, but the king raised his hand, silencing her. "The council is dismissed for today. Tomorrow, at noon, we will reconvene to discuss the full implications of this revelation and the next steps. One by one, the council members rose, some making respectful bows in my direction, already recognizing me as a member of the royal house, others maintaining carefully neutral expressions. Serena made a perfectly executed curtsy, her eyes never leaving mine, before withdrawing with Lord Tormund, when only the king, Helena, and I remained in the chamber. I let out the breath I hadn't realized I was holding. My legs trembled with the tension of the confrontation. "You were magnificent," Helena said, approaching to adjust the tiara that had slipped slightly during the meeting. "I just stood there," I replied, still dazed by everything that had happened. "Sometimes," the king said, "the most powerful demonstration of strength is simply to exist. When others tried to erase your existence," I looked at him, this man who had transformed my life twice, first by rescuing me from the forest, and now by revealing my true identity. "And now? What happens from here?" "Now," he said, a rare smile touching his lips, "your true journey home begins." That night, I couldn't sleep. The full moon bathed my room, no longer a guest chamber, but the old suite that had belonged to my mother, with silver light, transforming everything into shadows and dreams. The tiara rested on a velvet cushion on the dressing table, occasionally sparkling when passing clouds allowed the moonlight to touch the blue stones. Aurora. My true name echoed in my mind like a chant, strange and familiar at the same time. I had spent the rest of the day with Helena, listening to stories about my parents, the king's gentle uncle, considered weak for his compassion, my mother, the sorceress who abandoned her forest folk for love, only to be rejected by the court for her origins. Each story was like recovering a fragment of memory I didn't know I had lost. Gradually, the orphaned girl from the border village and the exiled princess of the Northwood house began to merge into a single person. Me, complete for the first time. A soft knock on the door interrupted my thoughts. I rose, adjusting the silk robe, another strange item I was trying to get used to, and opened the door. The king was there, alone without guards, dressed more simply than usual, just dark trousers and a linen tunic under a light cloak. He looked younger this way, less the severe monarch, more the man. "Forgive the hour," he said. "I imagined you would also be sleepless." I gestured for him to enter, suddenly aware of the intimacy of the moment, the two of us, alone, in my personal chambers, in the dead of night. If before such a situation would already be scandalous, now it carried even more complex political implications. "Many revelations in a single day," I commented, maintaining a certain distance as he walked to the window. "Observing the moon. More will come," he replied. "Elara will not give up easily, and Serena is more dangerous than she appears. Her smile hides sharp teeth. And what is your advice for dealing with these threats? You, who have navigated these political waters for so long." He turned to me, the moonlight drawing half his face in silver, leaving the other half in shadows. "My advice?" A melancholic smile touched his lips. "Do not trust anyone completely, not even me." His frankness surprised me. "Why do you say that?" "Because I am a king before I am a man. Because I have duties to the kingdom that can sometimes conflict with other desires." His eyes met mine with unsettling intensity. "I want you to enter this game with open eyes, Aurora. Not as a pawn, but as a player." The way he said my true name sent a shiver down my spine. It's hard to know how to play when I barely know the rules. "You will learn quickly. You have the blood of the royal house, after all." He took a step towards me. "But there is something more important you need to know. Something about the real reason your parents were killed." My heart quickened. I thought it was politics, the fear that a half-blood child would tarnish the pure lineage. "That was the public justification," he said, lowering his voice. "The true reason was more dangerous. Your mother brought with her ancient knowledge of the forest folk, the magic of blood and moon." Magic. The word sounded strange, like a children's story. The ancient powers that sustained the Northwood for centuries, before we began to rely on political alliances and armies. He walked to the door, checking that it was securely closed, then returned, standing so close I could feel the warmth emanating from his body. "Your mother foresaw an era of darkness if the Northwood turned away from its mystical roots. She began to teach this knowledge to Edric, your father, preparing him to lead a spiritual renewal of the kingdom. And that threatened the established power, I concluded, the pieces falling into place. Exactly. My father and my uncle Darius saw ancient magic as primitive superstition, incompatible with their visions of a modern, civilized Northwood. The bitterness in his voice was palpable. So they eliminated the threat, or thought they had eliminated it. What do you mean? His eyes gleamed strangely in the moonlight. Blood magic does not die easily, Aurora. It flows through generations waiting to be awakened. Carefully, he raised his hand, lightly touching my face. That's why Alara fears you. It's not just your right to the throne that threatens her. It's the power that can flow in your veins, if you learn to awaken it. I recoiled a step, stunned by the implication. Are you suggesting I have magical powers? That's crazy. I grew up as an ordinary Omega, with nothing extraordinary. And yet, you survived where others would perish. You found your way back to court against all odds. His gaze studied me as if searching for something beyond the surface. When I found you in the forest, you were surrounded by experienced hunters, but none had managed to touch you. It was true. In the confusion of the escape, I had never questioned how I managed to evade so many pursuers for so long. Coincidence, I murmured, but the words sounded hollow even to my own ears. Perhaps, he conceded, or perhaps Lyra's blood is stronger than anyone imagined. He withdrew something from inside his cloak, a small book bound in worn leather, tied with a faded ribbon. This was her journal. Helena kept it all these years, waiting for the moment to return it to her mistress's daughter. I took the book with trembling hands. It was like holding a piece of my own soul, lost and now rediscovered. There is knowledge there, he said softly. Knowledge that can protect you in the difficult days to come. Why are you telling me this? Why are you helping me recover a power your own father tried to eradicate? He remained silent for a long moment, the conflict visible on his face. When he finally spoke, his voice had a vulnerability he had never shown before. Because the Northwood is dying. Crops fail, diseases spread, winters grow longer each year. Political alliances are bandages over wounds that need true healing. His eyes met mine, intense and sincere. And because from the moment I saw you, something within me recognized something within you. Something that transcends titles, politics, and even duty. My heart beat so hard I was sure he could hear it. There was an implicit confession in his words, a feeling neither of us had dared to name since my arrival at court. It's dangerous what you're suggesting, I whispered. For both of us. True power is always dangerous, he replied. Like true affection. He stepped closer again, and this time I did not recoil. His hand touched my face delicately, as if I were made of porcelain that could crack at the slightest touch. I cannot offer guarantees, Aurora, nor promises. The path ahead of us is uncertain, full of visible and invisible enemies. His fingers traced the line of my jaw, sending shivers down my skin. But I offer an alliance, not between king and subject, nor between distant cousins of the same house, but between two beings who, against all odds, found something rare in this cold world. And what would that alliance be? I asked, my voice almost failing. You explore your mother's knowledge, awaken the power that is yours by birthright. I protect you as you learn, offer the shield of my position and influence. Together we discover if the Northwood can be healed, not only by political alliances, but by the return of ancient magic. It was a dangerous proposal, seductive and frightening at the same time. I looked at the journal in my hands, feeling its weight, not just of paper and ink, but of destiny and possibility. What if I fail? What if there's no magic to awaken? A smile touched his lips. Then we will face that future too, together, if you allow it. In that moment, under the moonlight that bathed the room in silver, I made my decision. Not as the Omega rescued from the mud, nor as the newly discovered exiled princess, but as the woman I was becoming, a fusion of both, forged by pain and revelation. Together, I agreed, my voice firmer now. His eyes shone with contained emotion, and for a moment I thought he would kiss me. Instead, he took my hand and brought it to his lips, a formal gesture that somehow carried more intimacy than the most passionate of kisses. Tomorrow we begin, he said, reluctantly moving towards the door. Rest if you can. The days ahead will demand all your strength. When he left, I stood holding the journal against my chest, feeling the pulse of possibilities opening before me. Exiled princess, heir to ancient magic, woman of newly discovered strength. I didn't yet know which of these roles would define my future, or if it would be a combination of all of them. But as the moon continued its journey across the sky, a certainty grew within me, clear and unshakable as crystal. Whatever path lay ahead, I would no longer walk it alone. The next day dawned with a clear, cold sky, the promise of impending winter hanging in the air. I spent the first hours of the morning with Helena and Lady Morgana, who patiently began to fill in the gaps of my family history, unfolding before me a tapestry of names, events, and alliances that formed the context of my existence. At the same time, Serena and her entourage remained visible throughout the fortress, observing, evaluating, maintaining diplomatic smiles that did not reach their calculating eyes. Ilara had disappeared after the council the night before. To reorganize her strategies, Helena commented with a shrewd smile. At noon, as promised, the council reconvened. This time I entered not as a spectator or an accused, but as a legitimate member of the royal house, occupying the chair that had once belonged to my father. My mother's tiara rested on my head, no longer a strange symbol, but a palpable reminder of my right to be there. The king conducted the meeting with the cold efficiency that characterized him in matters of state. The practical aspects of my official return were discussed. A royal decree would be issued, announcing my identity to the entire kingdom. A formal presentation ritual would be held on the next full moon. Tutors would be assigned to fill the gaps in my education on history, politics, and court etiquette. Serena and Lord Tormund participated politely, even offering assistance with Southridge tutors who could enrich my training. It was a clever move to stay close, become indispensable, gain my trust while seeking weaknesses. And what about the alliance issue? Lord Valerian, one of the oldest council members, finally asked, giving voice to the question everyone avoided. Negotiations with the Southridge were based on the expectation of a royal marriage. The king looked at me briefly before replying. The discovery of Lady Aurora's identity opens new diplomatic possibilities that need to be carefully considered. For now, I suggest that all previous arrangements be temporarily suspended while we fully assess our options. Suspension is not cancellation, Serena skillfully observed, a slight smile touching her lips. We remain open to discussions on how to strengthen the ties between our houses, in whatever format benefits both kingdoms. I realized the insinuation in her words. She had not yet given up the throne, only recalculated her route to achieve it. When the council ended, the king announced that we would spend the afternoon in private session, reviewing royal house documents that I would need to know. It was a transparent excuse to isolate ourselves, but no one dared to question it. Hours later, we found ourselves in the old library of the West Wing, not the official one, frequented by scholars and councillors, but a smaller, more intimate one that had belonged to my mother. The books that filled it were not political treatises or military histories, but texts on natural magic, lunar cycles, properties of herbs and crystals, and ancient knowledge of the forest folk. Your mother transformed this place into her sanctuary, the king explained, running his fingers over the dusty spines. After her death, my father ordered it sealed. I reopened it only when I found her journal, trying to understand the truth about the past. I picked up one of the books, bound in faded blue leather, its pages filled with delicate handwriting that I somehow knew was my mother's. Drawings of plants and lunar symbols adorned the margins, and a strange feeling of recognition swept through my body. Where do we begin? I asked, the reality of our situation weighing on me again. At the beginning, he replied, retrieving a rolled parchment from a hidden drawer in the central desk. The prophecy your mother transcribed shortly before her death, the one that I believe sealed her destiny? And mine. He unrolled the parchment with reverent care. The paper was thin, almost translucent, and the words written on it seemed to glow subtly in the candlelight, as if they contained an energy of their own. When the moon bleeds and the earth sickens, he read, his voice taking on a ritualistic quality, The lost daughter shall return, carrying in her veins the power of the ancients. The lonely king shall recognize in her the mirror of his own broken soul. Together they can restore what was broken or condemn the kingdom to eternal darkness. Blood will call to blood, heart will call to heart, and destiny shall be sealed under the blood moon. The words reverberated through the room as if they had a life of their own, and I felt a shiver run down my spine. A prophecy is just words, I said, more to convince myself than from actual skepticism. Words have power, he replied softly, especially words spoken by someone with your mother's gift. I looked again at the parchment, and suddenly the symbols on the margins seemed to move, to rearrange themselves. I blinked, and they returned to normal. What exactly do you expect from me? He approached, his intense eyes fixed on mine. That you explore your potential. That you discover if the magic that ran in your mother's veins also runs in yours. He hesitated, then added more softly, and that you consider the possibility that our meeting in the forest was not coincidence, but destiny. Destiny, I repeated, the word strange on my tongue. A convenient concept to justify difficult choices. A rare smile touched his lips. Skeptical, as I was, before I found you. The air between us seemed charged with unspoken possibilities, dangers, and promises intertwined like the symbols on the pages of the book I still held. For a moment, I allowed myself to imagine a future where we were not just political allies united by necessity, but something deeper, truer. A sound at the door interrupted the moment. Helena entered, her normally serene face marked by lines of concern. "Forgive the intrusion," she said, making a quick curtsy. "But there is something you need to know immediately. Elara was seen leaving the castle at dawn, accompanied by 2 guards loyal to her." The king frowned. "Where to?" "Rumors say towards the Western Mountains." Helena's eyes met mine, laden with meaning. "To the last known village of the forest folk." I felt my blood run cold. "My mother's people," Helena nodded gravely. "If she manages to find them, if she manages to convince them that you are an imposter, she would try to undermine my legitimacy through the only connection no one in court can verify directly," I concluded, the strategy becoming clear. "My maternal heritage," the king swore softly. "We must act quickly. If Elara returns with proofs that you have no connection to the forest folk, then I need to find them first," I said, a sudden determination taking hold of me. "I need to discover the truth about my mother, about her magic, about who I really am." Helena and the king exchanged glances. "It's dangerous," he said. "The Western Mountains are treacherous, especially with winter approaching. And the forest folk rarely welcome strangers with warmth." "I won't be a stranger to them," I replied. "I am Lyra's daughter." I raised the book I still held. "And I have her knowledge to guide me." A thoughtful silence fell over the library. The king walked to the window, watching the sun begin its descent towards the horizon. "I would go with you," he finally said, "but my absence from court at this moment would be immediately noticed and would generate more suspicion." "I will accompany her," Helena offered. "I know the way, and I was her mother's friend. They will recognize me." The king nodded slowly, still with his back to us. "You will leave tomorrow before dawn. I will tell the council that Lady Aurora is retiring to study royal house documents, preparing for her formal presentation. Few will question her temporary absence from court affairs." "What about Serena and Lord Tormand?" I asked. "They will certainly notice." "Leave them to me," he replied, finally turning. The expression on his face was that of the king, not the man, calculating, cold, determined. "I will keep their attention occupied with preliminary negotiations on trade and border defense. The less they suspect your true mission, the better." The decision was made. As Helena withdrew to make the necessary preparations, the king and I remained in the library, the energy between us subtly shifting. He approached, taking my hands in his. "Be careful," he said, his voice low and intense. "Elara has allies in unexpected places, and the forest folk guard secrets that can be both a blessing and a curse." "I will return," I promised, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. His eyes searched mine. as if seeking something beyond words. Then, in a sudden movement that broke all etiquette and reserve, he pulled me into a firm embrace. His scent, wood, leather, and something indefinable that was only his, enveloped me, and for a moment I allowed myself to rest against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "Aurora," he murmured against my hair, my name sounding like a prayer on his lips. "When you return, there will be decisions to make, paths to choose." He pulled back just enough to look into my eyes. "But know that whatever your choice, you have already transformed this kingdom, and this king." Our breaths mingled, and the world seemed to have shrunk to that moment, that library, those unspoken words hanging between us. Then, slowly, he pulled away, resuming the mantle of royal distance he carried before others. "Go," he said, more formally now. "Prepare yourself. Rest. The journey will be arduous." I nodded, feeling the loss of his closeness like a cold wind. With my mother's book firmly clutched to my chest, I headed for the door. Before leaving, I turned back one last time. "Blood will call to blood," I recited softly, words from the prophecy that had been etched into my memory. "Heart will call to heart." A rare, genuine smile illuminated his face for a brief moment. "And destiny shall be sealed under the blood moon." The journey to the Western Mountains began even before the sun rose on the horizon. Dressed in simple travel clothes, my mother's journal and some of the most important books tucked into a leather pouch, I followed Helena through secret passages that led outside the castle walls. 2 of the king's trusted guards accompanied us, not flaunting uniforms or royal insignia, but armed and vigilant. The first day of travel was quiet, crossing fields and small villages where no one gave us more than a passing glance. We were just ordinary travelers, perhaps merchants or pilgrims. The second day led us to the edge of the Great Western Forest, where the trees grew denser and the air carried a different scent. Humus, fungi, wildflowers, and something more. Something ancient and indefinable. "The forest recognizes Lyra's blood in you," Helena commented as we entered the shadow of the first truly large trees. "Feel it. The air changes around you." I hadn't consciously noticed, but she was right. The breeze seemed to dance differently near me. The leaves whispered distinctly, as if greeting me. "It's just suggestion," I murmured, but without conviction. Helena smiled, the kind of smile that carried centuries of knowledge. "The oldest magic doesn't need elaborate rituals or enchantments. It's in the blood, in the breath, in the mutual recognition between living beings." At night, we camped in a small clearing. The guards took turns keeping watch while Helena taught me to identify herbs and roots my mother would have known. Under the starlight, I opened the journal and began to read random pages, letting the voice of a woman I had never consciously known guide me. On the 3rd night, I dreamed, not common dreams, but vivid visions of a woman with my eyes and darker hair, singing as she braided flowers into complex patterns. In the dream, she looked directly at me and smiled. "Aurora," she said, my name sounding like music in her voice. "Finally you return." I woke with tears in my eyes and the taste of wild honey on my tongue. By the 5th day, the forest gave way to the first elevations of the mountains. The air grew thinner, the terrain steeper, and Helena began to look for specific marks on the rocks, symbols almost imperceptible to untrained eyes. "Signs of the people," she explained. "They change the paths regularly to confuse outsiders, but the symbols guide those who know how to read them." We followed trails that seemed to disappear, only to re-emerge yards ahead, skirting precipices and crossing small streams of crystal-clear water. On the 7th day, as the sun began to set, Helena stopped abruptly, raising her hand for us all to do the same. "We are being watched," she said calmly, without fear in her voice. "For at least 3 hours." The guards tensed, hands on their sword hilts, but Helena gestured for them to remain calm. She took 3 steps forward, then spoke into the apparent emptiness of the forest in a language I had never heard before, musical, fluid, with sounds that resembled the wind through the leaves. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, as if materialized from the very air, figures emerged from the surrounding trees and rocks. Men and women with sun-bronzed skin, hair braided with beads and feathers, wearing leather clothing and colourful fabrics that seemed part of the landscape. Their faces were serious and all carried weapons, bows, spears, daggers. An older man stepped forward. His face was marked by deep lines of age and expression, and his eyes, amber like mine, examined each of us with penetrating intensity. "Helena of the Northwood House," he said, his deep voice carrying only a slight accent. "Many winters have passed since your last visit." "Many winters, yes, Thorn of the ancient folk," Helena replied with a respectful bow. "I bring with me the one who has promised to return." All eyes turned to me, and I felt the weight of their gazes as something physical. The man named Thorn approached, his steps silent on the forest floor. He stopped less than an arm's length away, studying my face with such intensity that I had to resist the urge to recoil. "Lyra's eyes," he murmured. "But does she also carry her spirit?" Before I could answer, he raised his hand, asking for silence. From a pocket in his garments, he withdrew a small blue-green crystal, suspended on a leather cord. He held it between us, and to my surprise, the crystal began to emit a soft, pulsing light. "The crystal recognizes the blood," he said, something like admiration entering his voice. "You are truly Lyra's daughter, the one who left our people for love of a man from the lowlands." "My name is Aurora," I replied, finally finding my voice. I didn't know my mother, nor did I know my true name until a few days ago. Thorn frowned, putting the crystal away. "A story that needs to be heard in full." He turned to the others in the group. "Take us to the village. The Council of Elders will decide." We were escorted along increasingly steep paths until we reached a hidden valley between 3 mountain peaks. There, protected by rocks and dense vegetation, lay the village of the forest folk, not primitive as many in court would describe, but different from any settlement I had ever seen. The dwellings were partially built and partially grown, structures of living wood, where trees had been guided to form walls and roofs, intertwined with woven materials and leather. Lights glowed in coloured crystal windows, and the air carried aromas of herbs, food, and sweet smoke. We were led to a larger structure in the centre of the village, a kind of communal hall whose ceiling was formed by branches so densely intertwined that they formed a natural dome. Inside, a circle of older people awaited us, seated on cushions arranged around a central fire whose smoke rose through an opening in the ceiling. Thorn introduced us formally, speaking in his language and then translating for us. A very elderly woman whose snow-white hair fell in braids to her waist rose with the help of a carved staff. "I am Elysia, guardian of memories," she said, her voice surprisingly strong for someone of such advanced age. And I knew Lyra from the day of her birth until the day she left us, her eyes clouded by age but still piercing, fixed on me. "Come closer, Lyra's daughter." I approached hesitantly, aware of everyone's gazes. Elysia raised a wrinkled hand, touching my face with fingers that felt like ancient twigs. "Yes," she whispered. "The same spirit shines through those eyes." She turned to the rest of the circle. "The prophecy is fulfilled. The daughter returns when the earth sickens." Murmurs swept through the hall, some of approval, others clearly of concern. Thorn gestured and everyone fell silent. "The woman Alara arrived 2 days ago," he said, confirming our fears. "She spoke of an impostor who claimed to be Lyra's daughter, to usurp power in the Northwood court." "And what did you tell her?" Helena asked, tension evident in her voice. A thin smile touched Thorn's lips. "That the forest folk do not get involved in lowland politics." She left dissatisfied without the proofs she sought. I felt a momentary relief, but Elysia raised her hand again. "Do not celebrate yet, young Aurora. The woman Alara is dangerous not for what she knows, but for what she suspects. She seeks not only to discredit you, but something more valuable." "What would that be?" I asked. "The moon crystal," Elysia replied. "The artifact your mother took with her when she left our people. The source of her power and her birthright." Helena gasped softly beside me. "The moon crystal? I thought it was just a legend." "For the lowland folk, yes," Thorn said. "But for us, it is as real as the earth beneath our feet. It is the heart of ancient magic, the link between our people and natural forces." Elysia leaned heavily on her staff. Lyra was the designated guardian of her generation. When she left, she took the crystal with her, saying it would be needed to protect the northward lands from a coming darkness. And now that darkness has arrived, Thorn completed gravely. Crops fail, diseases spread, animals flee, waters darken. The earth sickens exactly as the prophecy foretold. My head spun with all these revelations. And this moon crystal, where is it now? That, Elysia said with a deep sigh, is what you will need to discover. Your mother hid it before she died, in a place known only to her, and perhaps to those she fully trusted. And you believe I can find it? I asked, skeptical. I didn't even know my mother. Blood knows blood, Elysia replied enigmatically. The crystal calls its guardian through dreams, visions, feelings. You must have already felt its call, even without understanding it. I thought of the strange dreams I had had, the feeling of recognition when reading my mother's journal, the way the forest seemed to respond to my presence. Still, it seemed too fantastical to believe completely. And if I find this crystal, what do you expect me to do with it? Thorn and Elysia exchanged glances, and it was the elder who replied, The prophecy speaks of restoring what was broken, the balance between the lowlands and the highlands, between the power of men and the power of nature. You and the lonely king together are the key to that restoration. My heart quickened at the mention of the king. How do you know about... Dreams speak, Elysia simply replied, and crystals show. The meeting continued into the night, with the elders sharing stories about my mother, her childhood in the village, her extraordinary gift for natural magic, her role as designated guardian of the moon crystal, and finally, her encounter with my father, Edric of the Northwood, during a hunting expedition that had accidentally brought him to the territory of the forest folk. It was love at first sight, said an elder named Mira, who had been a close friend of my mother. Something that transcended the differences between our peoples. We all tried to dissuade her, but Lyra was as stubborn as the north wind. She left with him, against the council's advice, Thorn continued, taking with her not only her heart, but also the moon crystal, saying it would be needed to fight a shadow she had seen in her visions. What kind of shadow? I asked, increasingly engrossed in this story that was my own heritage. Imbalance, Elysia replied. The pendulum swinging too far to one side, the side of human power, of domination, of separation from nature. She saw the consequences: barren land, poisoned water, suffocating air, spirits sickening along with bodies. And that is happening now, I concluded, remembering the king's words about failed harvests, spreading diseases, increasingly long and severe winters. Yes, Thorn gravely confirmed. And if the prophecy is correct, only the moon crystal in the hands of Lyra's daughter, united with the king of the Northwood, can restore balance before it's too late. We were invited to stay in the village for 3 days, the traditional time of forest folk hospitality. During this period, I was immersed in the culture and knowledge that should have been mine since birth. I learned simple rituals to honor natural cycles, studied the properties of medicinal plants, practiced the ancient language. That sounded strangely familiar on my tongue. And every night, Elysia worked with me, guiding me in meditations she called the dream path, a state between sleep and waking where, she said, I could access memories and knowledge dormant in my blood. On the 3rd night, I succeeded. In a deep trance, I saw my mother again. Not as a distant figure, but close, real, present. She was in a room I recognized as the secret library in the west wing of the castle, the one the king had shown me. But in the vision, the library looked different, more alive, with plants growing in elaborate pots and crystals shimmering on the shelves. My mother held something between her hands, a crystal the size of a closed fist, blue-silver, that seemed to contain dancing lights within it. She looked directly at me as if she could see me across time and spoke. Aurora, my daughter, if you are seeing this, then the time has come. The moon crystal is yours by birthright, and yours by necessity. Seek it where light meets water, where the 4 seasons meet in a single moment. Blood will know. I woke with a start, the last words echoing in my mind. Elysia, who had guided my meditation, watched me with eyes bright with expectation. "You saw her," she said, not as a question, but as a statement. "Yes," I replied, still dazed by the vividness of the experience. She spoke of the crystal, of where to find it. "And where would that be?" Alicia asked softly. I repeated the enigmatic words, feeling that their meaning was within my grasp, but not yet completely clear. Where light meets water, where the four seasons meet in a single moment. I frowned, trying to decipher the enigma. "It sounds like a specific place, but described in symbolic terms." "The most important secrets are always protected by riddles," Alicia said. "The meaning will reveal itself when you are ready to understand it." The next morning we prepared to leave. The village folk provided us with fresh supplies, detailed maps of the region, and, for me personally, a special gift, a small crystal similar to the one Thorn had used to confirm my identity, now attached to a braided leather cord. "To guide you," he explained, placing the cord around my neck, "and to remind you of who you truly are." Alicia, leaning on her staff, gave me one last piece of advice before we left. "The woman Ilara will not give up easily. She knows there is power in the crystal, though she does not understand its true nature. Be wary of shadows that move of their own accord, and trust the signs your blood recognizes." With promises to return in more favorable times, we left the village of the forest folk, carrying not only physical supplies, but also a renewed sense of purpose and identity. I was no longer just Aurora, the newly discovered exiled princess, but also heir to a lineage of guardians, bearer of a magical legacy I was only beginning to comprehend. The return journey to the castle was faster, following more direct paths that Helena now felt confident taking. As we rode, I couldn't stop thinking about the enigma left by my mother and the vision of the moon crystal, glowing with inner light, pulsing with energy that seemed alive. On the fourth day of travel, at dusk, something strange happened. We had set up camp in a small clearing, and I had briefly wandered off to wash my face in a nearby stream. As I leaned over the water, the small crystal on my neck began to emit a soft, bluish light. At the same time, I felt a presence behind me. I turned quickly, expecting to see one of the guards or Helena, but there was no one visible. Still, the feeling of being watched persisted. The crystal continued to glow, more intensely now. "Who's there?" I called, hand instinctively reaching for the dagger I carried at my waist. There was no answer, but a movement in the vegetation caught my attention. It wasn't wind. The leaves moved in a deliberate pattern, as if an invisible hand was pushing them aside. I followed the movement with my eyes and suddenly understood I wasn't being followed by a person, but by something different, something the forest folk would call a nature spirit. The crystal pulsed now, and I felt an inexplicable urge to follow it. I took a step in the direction of the movement, then another, and soon I was being guided through trees and bushes, following a trail I couldn't see, but could feel. After a few minutes, I reached a small natural spring, crystal clear water bubbling from a crevice between rocks, forming a small pool before continuing as a stream. My crystal glowed brighter than ever, and the spring water seemed to respond, shimmering with impossible reflections, as if stars had fallen and now swam in its depths. I leaned in, mesmerized by the sight, and in that moment, an image formed on the rippling surface, not my reflection, but the image of the Northwood Castle, and within it, a specific room. The map room. The map room was a place I knew only in passing, a circular chamber in the East Tower where an enormous three-dimensional map of the Northwood Kingdom had been built over generations. Rivers made of blue glass, mountains sculpted from stone, forests represented by preserved moss, cities marked with small metal structures. And in the center of the map, where the castle was represented, there was a miniature fountain, real, water flowing constantly through channels representing the kingdom's main rivers. Understanding hit me like lightning. Where light meets water, where the four seasons meet in a single moment. The map room was illuminated by 4 coloured glass windows, each representing a season of the year. When the sun hit the right angle, the 4 coloured lights converged precisely in the centre, where the miniature fountain bubbled. "The map room," I whispered, and the image in the water rippled, as if in confirmation. Another detail came to mind. The fountain on the map was not just decorative. It was fed by an ancient aqueduct system that brought water from a mountain, spring, the same spring that, according to legends, had convinced the first king to build the castle in that specific location. Sacred water, symbolic light, the 4 seasons represented in the stained glass. That was where my mother had hidden the moon crystal. When I returned to the camp, Helena immediately noticed something different about me. "You discovered something," she said, not as a question, but as an observation. "I know where the crystal is," I confirmed, my voice low so only she could hear, "and we need to get to the castle as quickly as possible." The next day, shortly after dawn, we sighted the towers of the Northwood Castle, silhouetted against the clear sky. Something in my chest tightened at the sight. It wasn't just a return to a safe place after a dangerous journey, but something deeper, a sense of belonging I had never fully experienced. We entered through the same secret passages we had used to leave, avoiding the curious eyes of the court. Helena went to check if our absence had been noticed or questioned, while I headed directly to my chambers to refresh myself and change out of my travel clothes into something more suitable for a princess of the royal house. I had barely finished dressing when a soft knock sounded at the door. My heart quickened, instinctively recognizing the rhythm of those knocks. I opened the door to find the king, alone, without the guards who usually accompanied him through the corridors. For a moment we just looked at each other, assessing the changes a few days had brought. He looked more tired, with shadows under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. But there was also a light in his gaze when he saw me. Relief, joy, something more that neither of us was prepared to name. "You returned," he said simply, as if needing to verbalize the fact to make it real. "As I promised," I replied, stepping aside for him to enter. When the door closed behind him, formality seemed to melt away. Without words, he took 2 steps and embraced me. Not the restrained, symbolic embrace of our farewell, but something more desperate, more true. I allowed myself to sink into that embrace, feeling the warmth of his body, the beat of his heart, the solid reality of his presence after days of uncertainty. "I feared I wouldn't see you again," he murmured against my hair. "Ilara returned enraged, spreading rumors about your escape. Serena and Tormund demanding explanations about your whereabouts." "And what did you tell them?" I asked, pulling back just enough to see his face. "The partial truth, that you were preparing for your formal presentation, studying the history and traditions of the royal house in seclusion." A faint smile touched his lips, but I suspect few believed it completely. "What matters is that we bought time," I said, suddenly eager to share my discovery. "I found the forest folk, and more importantly, I discovered where my mother hid the moon crystal." His eyes widened slightly, all his attention focused on me. "Where?" "In the map room," I replied. "Hidden where water and light meet, where the 4 seasons converge at a single point." He frowned, processing the implications. "The central fountain, of course. A brilliant hiding place. Few visit that room except on formal occasions, for military planning or border discussions." "We need to go there," I insisted. "Now, before Ilara or anyone else suspects." He hesitated. "It won't be easy. Since Ilara returned, she rarely leaves the East Tower, and Serena has increased her casual strolls through the castle, always accompanied by ladies who report every unusual movement." "Then we need a distraction," I concluded, an idea forming in my mind. "Something that draws everyone's attention away from the East Tower, at least for long enough." The king studied me for a moment, then a slow, almost predatory smile spread across his face. I have exactly what we need." An hour later, the entire castle buzzed with preparations for an unexpected royal announcement. Rumours flew through the corridors. The king had summoned the council, representatives of all noble houses, and especially the Southridge delegation for a communiqué of extreme diplomatic importance in the Great Hall. Naturally, Serena and Lord Tormund could not afford to miss such an announcement, and even Elara, as official counsellor, was obliged to be present. The king had carefully planned the timing, precisely when the sun would hit the correct angle for the 4 stained glass windows of the map room to project their coloured lights onto the central fountain. While the entire court gathered in the Great Hall, anxiously awaiting the king who would purposely be late, I slipped through less used corridors towards the East Tower. The small crystal on my neck glowed more and more intensely as I approached, confirming I was on the right path. The map room was deserted, as we expected. I entered silently, closing the door behind me. The enormous 3-dimensional map occupied almost all the space, a masterpiece of craftsmanship and geographical precision built over generations. And in the centre, exactly as in my vision, the small fountain bubbled softly. Crystal clear water flowing through meticulously sculpted channels representing the kingdom's rivers. I looked at the windows, 4 masterful stained glass panels, each depicting a season of the year in vivid colours. The afternoon sun was already beginning to project coloured beams through them, but they had not yet converged at the central point. I approached the fountain, observing how the water shimmered, seemingly normal, but with something different, clearer perhaps, more alive. As I watched, the sunbeams through the stained glass continued their gradual movement, approaching the centre. When the first beam of light, spring green, touched the water, something changed. The surface rippled in a way that could not be explained by natural flow. The second beam, summer red, joined the first, and the water began to glow subtly. The third, autumn gold, intensified the glow, and I felt the crystal on my neck vibrate in response. Finally, the fourth ray, winter blue, completed the circle. For a magical instant, the central fountain was a kaleidoscope of impossible colours, light dancing on water that seemed to respond consciously to the sun's touch. Following an impulse I could not rationally explain, I plunged my hand into the water. Instead of the expected resistance, my fingers passed through as if the water were merely an illusion. I reached deeper and my fingers touched something solid, crystalline. With my heart pounding, I pulled out the object, and there it was, exactly as in my vision. The moon crystal, the size of a closed fist, blue-silver with dancing lights within it. The moment I held it, the small crystal on my neck shone like a star, and the moon crystal responded, pulsing with its own light. A strange sensation ran through my body, warmth, cold, tingling, strength. It was as if something dormant awakened within me, recognizing and responding to the power contained in the crystal. "Blood recognizes blood," I whispered, repeating Elysia's words. I examined the crystal, marveling at its beauty and the energy that seemed to emanate from it. Its surface was curiously warm to the touch, and the lights inside moved like living constellations, complex patterns that seemed to tell stories I didn't yet know how to read. It was then I noticed the carvings at the base, ancient symbols, similar to those I had seen in my mother's books and in the Forest Folk village. Running my fingers over them, I felt as if I could almost comprehend their meaning, like words in a forgotten language that I was beginning to remember. A noise at the door alerted me. Quickly, I tucked the crystal into the pouch I carried under my dress against my body. The door opened, and for a terrifying instant I thought it was Elara or one of her spies. But it was Helena, her face tense with concern. "Did you find it?" she asked in an urgent whisper. I nodded, unable to suppress a triumphant smile. "Exactly where my mother indicated." "Then we need to get out of here immediately," she said, casting nervous glances into the corridor. "The king won't be able to keep everyone distracted for long. And Elara has started asking questions about your absence from the meeting." We moved quickly through the corridors, avoiding busier areas until we reached my chambers. Only when the door closed behind us did we allow ourselves to relax a little. "What happens now?" Helena asked, looking at the pouch where I had put the crystal. "I'm not sure," I admitted. "The forest folk spoke of restoring balance, but not exactly how to do it. Helena frowned thoughtfully. Lyra used to say that the crystal was not just an object of power, but an amplifier of its guardian's will, that its true potential manifested only when used with clear purpose and a pure heart. I took the crystal from the pouch, holding it between my hands. Under the normal light of my chambers, it seemed less magical, more a precious but inert object. However, I could still feel a subtle energy pulsing within it like a distant heart. We need the king, I finally decided. The prophecy mentions us both together, the lonely king and the lost daughter. Helena nodded. He will come as soon as he can get away without raising suspicion. Until then, keep the crystal hidden. There are eyes and ears throughout the castle, and now that you've found it, you'll be in greater danger than ever. As we waited, I studied my mother's journal more intently, looking for any mention of using the moon crystal. I found passages about healing rituals, about communicating with nature spirits, about restoring sickened lands, but also warnings about the price of power, about the need for balance, about the dangers of interfering with natural cycles without full understanding. As the sun began to set, Helena withdrew to check on the progress of the meeting in the Great Hall. I remained alone with the crystal, watching how the evening light created new patterns on its surface. Experimentally, I began to trace the symbols carved at the base, mentally repeating words in the ancient language I had learned during my stay with the forest folk. To my surprise, the crystal responded, its glow intensifying, the internal lights moving faster. Following an instinct I didn't fully comprehend, I placed the crystal on the kingdom map that lay open on my desk. Immediately, lines of blue-silver light began to extend from the crystal, tracing patterns on the paper that did not correspond to known roads or political borders. Lines of power, I murmured, recognizing the concept from Elysia's teachings, the paths of natural energy. The map revealed by the crystal showed the kingdom in a completely different way. Not divided by human borders, but by flows of energy, by connections between mountains, rivers, forests, and other points that, to untrained eyes, would seem random. And in the center of this new map, where the Northwood Castle stood, there was a complex knot of converging lines, a point of natural power upon which the fortress had been built, probably intentionally by the first kings who still understood such things. But there was something wrong with this central knot. The lines, which should flow freely, seemed obstructed, weakened. Some were completely interrupted, like rivers blocked by invisible dams. The imbalance, I understood, remembering Elysia's words about my mother's vision. Natural energy is not flowing as it should. A noise at the door startled me. Quickly, I covered the map and the crystal with an open book, moments before the door opened. It was the king, alone, his face a mask of exhaustion and contained tension. "Did you manage to get away?" I asked, rising to meet him. "With difficulty," he replied, closing the door firmly. "Ilara is more suspicious than ever, and Serena..." He shook his head. "Serena is more dangerous than I initially assessed. There's something in her eyes when she speaks of you, not just envy or political ambition, but something more personal." "She feels what's between us," I said softly, surprising myself with the audacity. "Even if it's never been spoken aloud." His eyes met mine, intense and vulnerable at the same time. "Yes," he simply agreed. Then, as if remembering the purpose of his visit, "Did you find it? The crystal?" In response, I removed the book covering it. The moon crystal glowed softly on the map, the lines of energy still visible, though weaker without my direct touch. "By the ancient gods," he murmured, approaching slowly as if fearing the crystal might disappear if he made sudden movements. "It is more extraordinary than the legends described." "And more problematic," I added, indicating the map and the energy lines. "See these lines? They are the natural paths of power that sustain the kingdom. They are blocked, weakened. That's why crops fail, diseases spread, winter prolongs." He studied the map carefully, his eyes tracing the patterns revealed by the crystal. "And how do we restore these paths?" "According to the forest folk's teachings, a ritual is needed," I replied, quickly consulting my notes from my mother's journal. "Performed at the central point of power, which not by coincidence is exactly where the castle was built." "The catacombs," he said immediately. the oldest chambers beneath the Great Hall. There's a central well that, according to legend, was the reason the first king chose this location to erect the fortress. The sacred spring, they called it. I nodded, the pieces fitting together. The ritual needs to be performed on the next full moon, and it needs to be conducted by... I hesitated, looking at my notes again. Those who carry the blood and destiny, the guardian and the protector, united in purpose and heart. You and I, he concluded, his eyes meeting mine. Yes, but there's a warning here. I pointed to a specific passage in the journal. The price of balance is balance itself. What was taken must be returned. What was denied must be accepted. Enigmatic, he commented, like all ancient texts on magic. And potentially dangerous, I added. We are dealing with forces we don't fully understand. He was silent for a moment, his gaze alternating between the crystal and my face. Finally he spoke, his voice softer. After everything that has happened, your discovery in the forest, your return to court, the confirmation of your identity, and now the recovery of the crystal, do you still believe it's a coincidence? That our destinies are not intertwined in some way? No, I admitted, feeling the weight and liberation of the truth. I don't believe in coincidences, not anymore. He approached, taking my hands in his, the crystal between us shining more intensely with our combined touch. Then we will perform the ritual. We will restore balance. And then... He left the sentence, incomplete, but his eyes spoke of possibilities, of futures we were only beginning to glimpse. Then, I completed, we will discover together what it means to govern a kingdom in balance, what it means to unite human and natural power, what it means to follow not just duty but also the heart, he concluded, his fingers intertwining with mine around the crystal. The glow intensified, pulsing like a living heart between us. For a moment I saw not just the man before me, the severe king, the solitary ruler, but all the possibilities he carried. I saw the boy he had been, the man he was, the king he could become. And I knew, with a certainty that transcended logic or reason, that he saw the same in me. The full moon would arrive in 3 nights. 3 nights to prepare the ritual, to study my mother's writings, to better understand the crystal's power. 3 nights to avoid Alara, Serena, and all the others who might interfere with our plans. 3 nights to decide, finally, what future we would choose. Not just for the kingdom, but for ourselves. As the sun set completely, leaving the room, in shadows broken only by the blue-silver glow of the crystal, we made a silent vow. Not with words, but with glances, with intertwined hands, with hearts finally open after so long, closed by fear, by duty, by loneliness. Time would tell if we were truly the chosen ones of the prophecy, capable of restoring the lost balance. But in that moment, a simple truth revealed itself, clear as the crystal between us. Whatever path lay ahead, we would no longer walk it alone.